building of Romania. And we've been working a lot on programs in the Middle East, but the emergence of a violent conflict situation and a war in Europe led us to partner together in a program that we called Peace Support Ukraine, a peace building program for our Ukrainian partners that is supporting by the Italian office of the Soka Gakkai, the Italian Soka Gakkai Institute, and their peace building program. So we are here today to celebrate the courage, the strength, and the peace building capacity of Ukrainian women within this webinar that we called Ukrainian Women for Peace. And it is part of the 16 days campaign against gender-based violence. So we decided to organize this webinar in this period that goes from the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women until the Human Rights Day. And, you know, this is an international campaign, but today focusing on the role of Ukrainian women to support and empower a gender-based vision for peace building and to promote the security of Ukrainian people overall is very important. So we have three extremely interesting speakers today, so I will leave space immediately for them. And so thanks Maria, Nina, and Olga for being with us. And thanks to everyone attending the webinar. And, you know, please note down your questions, your comments, because there will be space for everyone to speak at the end. And I will start with Dr. Maria Levchenko, Peace Building Officer of the Romanian Peace Institute, Patrir, who is engaged with us in this nationwide program in Ukraine to support local peace building actors. So Maria, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Martina, and good afternoon, everyone, or good evening, good morning, depending where you are. I'll be sharing my presentation with you in just a second, and I hope you'll be able to see. Can you give me a thumbs up if you can see it, Olga, Martina, because I see you. Okay, great, thank you so much. So in my presentation, I'll try to focus a little bit more on the general trends that we see in the field, and then I'll try to do a little bit what we are doing what I wanted to share that very often women and girls are subject to violence, to sexual-based violence. They are the victims of the war, but in Ukraine, they're not silent victims. Since the first day of the full-scale invasion, Ukrainian women and girls have joined armed forces. They have joined territorial defense forces, but they also participated as nurses, as doctors, as conductors on the train, as teachers, as psychologists, trying to create a vision for peace and trying to fight for our freedom and for our independence. So in that sense, women in Ukraine are taking a very particular important position, and their efforts should be recognized and supported. So some of the general trends that are very evident right now in Ukraine that I wanted to share with you is that hundreds of women and girls have become victims of sexual assault and torture committed by the Russian army. Many those who have fled Ukraine as refugees struggle to access medical care, they struggle to access abortions, they are very vulnerable to human trafficking and victimization by their hosts. Also, women refugees, they are the main caretakers, they're the primary caretakers of the children and the elderly. They are the sole breadwinners for their families. That's why for them it's very hard and it's very important to be supported in this field as well. And also, if you look at the peace building area and the peace building field, the perspective of women have been noticeably absent from dominant narratives about the war. So on one hand, we hear these messages that involve women in negotiations, in mediation, in dialogue facilitation. And at the same time, they are not present in the picture and they are not participating on the same ground as men are. So if you look a little bit and zoom in into women as victims of war, the atrocities committed by Russian army became visible after the first cities have been liberated, such as Bucha, Irpin, Hostomel, and Izium. And these cases have been reported not only with regard to women, but also to children and men. The main problem in Ukraine is there is a missing legal definition of the conflict-related sexual violence, and therefore there is a lack of access to occupied territories, which makes it impossible to provide support and comprehensive help and assistance to the survivors there. We don't even know the exact number of men, women, and children who have been sexually assaulted. Therefore, many of them are not coming to the police. Many of them don't have an opportunity to report, and they're deeply traumatized by what is happening right now. If you look at the women as refugees in Ukraine and live in Ukraine, we have to understand that, first of all, they're fleeing without nothing. They're fleeing with 2 backpacks. They don't have a proper access to sexual and reproductive health care in the host communities. For example, Poland doesn't allow abortion, so many women who have been traumatized or victims of the sexual conflicts of sexual violence, they don't have access to the abortion or health care. Many groups of refugees face additional barriers to reaching safety. For example, Roma community, who have been struggled and stranded on the customs and the border areas without opportunity to actually enter the host communities, accepting Ukrainians as refugees. And of course, many Ukrainian women refugees don't speak the language of the host communities, English, German, Polish, Italian. Therefore, they have fewer economic resources. They lack basic legal documentations, and they have fewer job opportunities to provide for themselves, but also for their families. And of course, there's a risk of gender-based violence, including sexual exploitation, abuse, and trafficking. And many of such cases have been reported since the start of the full-scale invasion, when the first refugees have been fleeing Ukraine. At the same time, on the contrary, we see a different picture. Women have taken a leadership position in the response to humanitarian crisis. The first respondents to the unfolding crisis in the occupied territories and deoccupied territories have been women-led organizations and initiatives. Delivery of hygiene products, food, birth control, in the areas also by Russian occupation was largely organized by young women activists who were risking their lives and driving there by themselves. However, despite this increased importance of women who are taking the leadership position and trying to organize humanitarian assistance, they're still not fully involved in decision-making around humanitarian programming on the number of international organizations. And also there is a little evidence about the inclusion of women leaders as participants in formal, but also informal peace processes, and it's not being prioritized. If you look at the past, before the full-scale invasion, but during the 8 years of war, only 2 women were sent from Ukraine out of 12 total delegates, and no women were sent by Russia to participate in the official negotiations. So this is a process where we see the increased importance of women as being equal delegates, but at the same time, they're not being involved. Women in peace building right now face a number of challenges. First of all, many international organizations which previously have been focused on women participation, on meaningful participation of LGBTQI community of youth, switched their work into immediate humanitarian response. Women are not being included in the discussion related to conflict resolution, peace building, into the narratives of the war. And there is also absence of women leaders, negotiators, mediators, dialogue facilitators, and women's civil society in the meetings, which is likely to have a very negative impact on the inclusion of gender and human rights. So the main recommendations, what we have seen happening right now in the field, both in Ukraine, but also outside of Ukraine, is the need to amplify women's voices on the ground, both civilians and service women, those who are fighting in the armed forces as territorial defense force as well. There is a need to engage and support civil society, and in particular, women-led, youth-led, LGBTQI organizations directly, instead of involving large international organizations, which quite often are coming to Ukraine without knowing the context in which they have to operate. And of course, there's a need to support women dialogue platforms all across the region, but also support youth platforms, young girls platforms, to identify the ways to stop the war, prevent further escalation of the conflict, but also to address the long-term impact of the conflict and the violence. And I wanted to end my presentation with a quote by one of my favorite books by Svetlana Alexievich. It's called Unwomanly Face of War. And she wrote about women combatants who have been fighting during the Second World War from the Soviet Union. And she wrote, "Women war has its own colors, its own smells, its own lightning, and its own range of feelings. There are no heroes and incredible feats. There are simply people who are busy doing inhumanly human things." And this is very true to Ukraine right now. Women are doing inhumanly human things every single day, and we have to raise awareness about that, but we have to support their resilience as well. That's all from my side. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Maria. And I think, you embody the example of how women are able to say a lot in a very limited amount of time and be really, really persuasive. So I know, and that's, your credibility is given by your current engagement now in the conflict situation. So I really thank you for that. So we pass now to our second speaker, Nina Putarska, who is representing in Ukraine the Women International League for Peace and Freedom. And we know how important this league has been in giving the world the possibility to have national action plans almost everywhere, promoting the role of women in building peace and security in their agencies and in their countries. So now, of course, this is a particularly challenging moment to embody this UN resolution in Ukraine. Nina, floor is yours.
Hello. I welcome all those present and interested in current conflict and tragedy that is ongoing in Ukraine. And yes, I represent Women International League for Peace and Freedom, and I started work together with the League on 2016. But my first research, which was related to conflict and women perspective in the everyday life during the conflict, started from 2014, and I done this 2015. And so I'm not new in the conflict. And after 24 February, I was not surprised with this, because many steps which many countries in the international community, I mean, it's not just signals from Russia. It was very clear that we are very close to something big, and we need to do something with this, because now it's quite difficult to deal, because there is no peace, I think, space for any dialogue about peace, even among civil society, because some of us, like civil society representative, too exhausted from this conflict, because everybody engaged in the situation in Ukraine, and all my friends from Ukraine, of course, we are starting morning and with the news and the information about shedding, and of course it's uh, it's not easy to continue to talk about any any I don't know, peace approach during the situation of hot stage of the conflict. And but I would like to raise some key issues from my side, because all these 8 years I spent a lot of time on I spent with the researchers, and especially with in-deep interview, and I believe that it's very important to bring the voices from grassroots, from like voices of ordinary people who are dealing every day with the situation of war, to conference, to any type of discussions, because I can see big gap, because I'm always participating in the conferences in many countries on different level, from academical level to human rights level, and this is really gap between people needs and people understanding of human security, because women peace and security agenda, it's a key agenda for peace, and we should understand what is a peace and what is a security. And for ordinary people, security means very different things. It's started from the electricity, and the end it's like physical security. And I'm trying to be very careful in the to highlight the issues about or and cases about rape, because it's not the main problem, I think, because dehumanization and the gender-based violence, which not mean that just rape, because many journalists and even many experts present gender-based violence just through the rape, but it's not the same, because just one explanation. During the evacuation, combatants put together men and women in the same bus, and they are spent a couple of hours on the road, and then combatants agreed to make a stop for a toilet, and for security reason, they are allowed just making these uh, personal stuff, physical stuff all together. So there are no rape, but this is gender-based violence. Also, it's about uh, undressing people for any reason. And also it's about how people are crossing any checkpoints and how many violence they faced during this. So because war is not just bombing and raping, it's a lot of challenges for humanity, and sometimes these challenges in the very ordinary things, but these things affect people even more than something more terrible. Because according to my interviews with the people from close to contact line 2 years ago, it's even before full scale invasion. The the I asked it about which situation put your in the shame. And one story about was about um, how people, and it was women, how they are trying to uh, gain water from the puddle because of lack of the water. And now we're facing with the same situation now in the key. And another story was with a guy from a combatant guy, and it doesn't matter which from which party. And his story was about his like he stole meat from the plate of his like comrades. And then in a couple of minutes shelling started, and all food was spoiled with the ground, with the sand, with everything. So nobody was able to eat this meat anymore. So, and to him it was the biggest shame in his life. But this guy participated in the more terrible things, but he remembered this war just with his shame. So I mean, this war is not just like black and white, or it's it's sometimes difficult to start to peace to talk about peace, but I really believe that we can start to speak about our experience and how we was able to survive during this war, because all our society are traumatized with this kind of experience, and we are all have our own pain and anxiety about many things. But the security means it's from the interview, like it's a quotation from the interview. Security means that you never think about security, because if you start to think about this, it means that you are not in the security anymore. And it's important to fix this moment in your mind. And also, what is also important to highlight, it's post-conflict reconciliation and post-conflict reconstruction. And now where many women and feminist organizations switch to humanitarian aid. And it's nothing new, because women role in the patriarchal society, it's a care work, it's a precarious work on economical vocabulary, but it's a care work on human rights and sociological vocabulary. And we are doing this care on different level, from psychological support to humanitarian aid support and medical support. And of course, after 8 months, many our women activists are already exhausted. And we need to care about them first, because our peace and our future depend on the ability of these women to be in this role. And especially important, and this is from my refugee experience, because women and children now in the same category. And sometimes it's also interesting, because in some donor programs it's the same, but children, they are not, shouldn't take any responsibility, and women are. So it's also really unfair to put um, like adults and with their specific needs and children in the same place. So, and of course, the like a red line across all my speeches, it's a solidarity, and how we can be together in the time of the war, and especially in the time when our governments not able to make any decision about peace and any decision or any peace agreements. And it's very important to us even now, because we are in the OEC meeting, and I'm now in the OEC meeting together with a delegation from Belarus and Russia and Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan and Georgia and other countries from our region. And it's extremely important to be together and remember that we need each other. And because we are like Ukrainians, we already tired, and maybe we next time and next period we will need more help from this society, like feminist and human rights and peace builders. And so staying together during this I don't know, terrible time of the war. But I'm, by my first education, I'm teacher of history and law, and then I became the sociologist. So I trying to feel that it's a cycles in the our in it's like historical and economical cycles. So 100 years ago, the people was in the very similar situation, and I really believe that we are also be able to follow this and survive through this, and save us in mental and physical way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nina. There is a very nice comment. There are nice comments for you in the chat. Please read them. And and thanks for taking time for us during this OECD conference. And I really admire the capacity of feminist movements to recognize how we are all interdependent and how we need to get together out of this, united feminist activists and ideas from different countries that are in conflict. And I also really respect the capacity that women have to say and to declare, we are exhausted, we need support. We need the international community that they should offer programs for rehabilitation from trauma. This is something on which we are also working with Patrir, and due to the strong request from local civil society in Ukraine to work on this. And here we come back to what you are saying, human security should come first. The international community that says, claims they want to promote security for Ukrainians, then, should secure first decent, needed amount of humanitarian aid, of peace building programs, of peace education, trauma recovery, everything you are mentioning to make sure the society is resilient to what is happening, to the occupation, to the dehumanization of the armed conflict, and all the discriminatory examples, that you were making. So thanks for bringing this forward. And after your powerful speech, we come to the third speaker. Welcome, Olga Matveyeva, a researcher on public administration and now located in Ruhr Universitat of Bochum, and active in the Ukrainian Expert Foundation of Dnipro. So Olga, thanks so much for being with us, joining this webinar, and the space for you now.
Thank you so much, dear Martina, for giving me a floor. I would like to add to previous speakers that it is really not easy now to speak about peace building during the war, and my country has really been under regular attacks. But even now, we all understand that peace building remains the priority and the first goal to achieve together. And being a researcher and representative of civil society organization, I'm studying the role of women in empowering civil society in Ukraine, and now it's not only Ukraine, which resists Russian aggression. And proceeding from our previous research, I can say that women in army, women in government, women in Ukrainian NGOs, and several volunteer organizations become a really powerful driving force of social unity based on you for probably for our society. Things like solidarity, care, and love. And statistics say that more than 6 million of Ukrainian women with their kids left the country as refugees after the beginning of this war in 2022. But using virtual public services like Ukrainian application of public services VIA and many others, as well as being connected on individual level to their families who are still staying in Ukraine, communities at their workplaces in Ukraine, they are trying actively participate in the social life and hereby preserve their Ukrainian identity and citizenship. In particular, what is should be mentioned that they launch crowdfunding campaigns, build international networks, and develop international projects and volunteer initiatives, and provide support that is needed at the moment. And during the war, the focus was put on resisting disinformation and fostering democratic transformations during and after the war, transformations of society driven by technologies. This is also very important to show the progress of Ukraine in democratic transformations during this huge stress. And I investigate the impact of digitalization on women-initiated participation in such democratic processes based on practices of citizen engagement in Ukraine in the context of the war. And within NGO activities, we reveal how technologies facilitate democratic transformations in Ukraine and really empower men and women who, how these transformational processes affect the ways their citizenship is enacted in their daily lives, and how technologies can or may help to reach gender equality in society. And according to this, I implement my research both with civic activities in two main directions, or let's say 2 levels. And first one is research and educational activities at grassroots level in Ukraine. Then our team is raising awareness on how is it possible to make such initiatives about support and help to Ukrainian army and volunteers, how to make them more effective using technologies. And also we are mapping and categorizing the innovative kind of aggregations of interest groups emerged during the war, thanks to technologies, and it helps in crystallization of these best cases for others, because we see how important now is it important now to share such initiative. And this includes civic initiatives launched by female activists, first of all, to withstand the pressure of Russia in various aspects, in various spheres, for example, helping military and assist refugees and so on. And next level is medium. I'm evaluating how the shifts in citizenship practices influence societal gendered behavior and contribute to the further digitalization of public services via civil tech. And how it is creating what probably can or definitely will be called a virtual country or virtual networks. And where I see my mission here, probably it is about highlighting and showing and describing the strength to international community and help Ukrainian people to find this tremendous stress caused by the war, to find the power for growth there and kind transformations. And now we can say that technologies will tie up the currently physically separated Ukrainian society and will remain the main instrument for creating a kind of semi-virtualized space of relationships between families, working spaces, links, platformized places, communities, and public institutions providing services from different parts of the globe. And taken as a whole, this space generates its own culture and traditions based on Ukrainian one, which in fact forms the basis for virtual country. In such a way, the virtualized place or it could be even named layer, which connects Ukrainians all around the globe. First of all, I mean Ukrainian women, develops all attributes of a modern state itself. It will be a smart ecosystem. It is actually a smart ecosystem of services, communication, and co-creation of common good. And this co-creation is a main driving force here, kind of new alternative to a traditional state. So what could or even should we do now? Where do I see my mission during the war? And right now it is about raising awareness about situation in Ukraine and also about issues which this new semi-virtualized world brings to women and all people in Europe. Besides challenges of finding new job, the need for studying new languages in different countries, needs for re-education, reintegration to the local communities, and education for the needs of local economy and full integration to local communities. Ukrainian female refugees face the problem of affirmation of their citizenship. It is contested not only by Ukrainians who stayed in Ukraine and provide direct help to army, internally displaced persons, but also by those in need who criticize those who left. And also Ukrainian women abroad often experience clashes with well-organized Russian diasporas. In European Union societies, influence of Russian diasporas cannot be underestimated. And this problem is very brightly visualized by conflicts in schools, where Ukrainian kids meet with Russian kids, and conflicts during political rallies, for example, and so on, a lot of examples. In particular, we organize rallies and public events to encourage, for example, German politicians and decision makers to increase their support to Ukraine right now, rather than to listen to those who suggest starting negotiations on Russian terms because of rising prices for energy and so on. And for these papers, we need these cases about successful women who really change this world right now, to show and very clear arguments to rise, and trying to be helpful for Ukrainian army and volunteer organization. Women have to master technology to make processes easier. And they're interested and literally forced to use such civic tech products and self-help maps, various applications, making them, launching thematic groups and channels for targeted communications, and solving problems to raise efficacy of their supportive currently internationalized activity. And finalizing the suggestion from perspective of our activities of scientists, academicians, and civil society actors. Peace building from our side is seen as a clear strategy and common activity for creating a necessary change right now, which can and probably should be empowered by technologies. And it is provided by volunteer initiatives and projects gathering people with same interests and what is most notably same values and goals, and embracing new like-minded people, which creates communities and unites country, even being abroad. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Olga. And I know that you are not only doing a research, and about the vision that technology can bring for peace building and for the role of women in peace building. You're actually practicing it also together with activists from Belarus, from other countries. So you are experiencing first person, and this attempt to build bridges. And this is very important, and thanks also for reminding us the very key role of the diaspora, of the Ukrainian diaspora now in Europe. I think we should all, as international peace workers and even humanitarian organizations, start, strengthening the dialogue with the Ukrainian diaspora in our countries, and also seeing the challenges with the Russian, as you were saying, diaspora. And what I've been experiencing myself, in the classes of my kids, is that also the Russian kids are subject to discrimination and isolation, because the other kids perceive, that Russian is the occupier, is the violent state. And then Russian kids are discriminated because of this. So, conflicts then, spread issues and discrimination on the youngest, categories of the population everywhere. So I think the three of you gave us a lot of insights. I'm sure there are many interesting people in our audience today, peace workers, men and women feminists that have been following this webinar. So I'd like to give space for them now to express their point of view or ask questions, or even bring forward their own experiences in working together with a gender perspective on humanitarian support, peace building, and perspectives to get over this conflict, or simply recognize the responsibilities and the mistakes done by our states in our countries and our institutions in this context. So I'm inviting them to raise their hand. You can do it with the option of Zoom if you want to speak. And everyone will have the possibility to do it, not only by chat, but also by speaking. We are not a large group, so don't be afraid. And we can give space for others. Let's see if anyone has anything to say or to ask today. We have a hand raised from Laura of Patria. Thanks, Laura.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you are. I would like to, first of all, thank the speakers for the amazing interventions they have given. I would have several questions, but for now, I will start with two, just to break the ice and start the conversation. First of all, I would like to ask if the speakers can think of specific challenges to accountability of crimes of war or against humanity committed against women or LGBTQI plus communities in Ukraine. What do you think about this, and if that's a question at all? And then, inspired by the contribution of Olga, actually, I would like to ask, since we were talking a lot about democracy and a future of women participation, how would you envision, and which steps do you think need to be taken for the increase of an effective women participation in a democratic space in Ukraine? Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Let's see if there is anyone else that wanted to ask questions to our speakers. We can take one more, then we go back to our three friends. I'm sure that many of us have been working within the women, peace and security agenda in our countries and in other countries. And we know how challenging it is to go beyond slogans and really, make a difference. Sometimes it is about funding, not enough funding given by institutions to make sure that the action plans can be actionized. And other times it is about political obstacles. So we know how many national action plans of European countries are now being used to support women in Iraq, in Lebanon, in Libya. That's our experience, for example, in bringing forward their voice on how to promote security in their countries. And I wanted to know, to have some information from you about the Ukrainian National Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security, and how you think it can help Ukrainian women to face this very difficult moment, and which support would you expect from other European countries, both from institutions and from civil society, by the European Union in general, to advance the women, peace and security agenda in Ukraine today? So I don't think we have other questions so far. I would ask you once again in the same order as before. So Maria first, to comment on the questions you've heard. You can pick one or you can answer more, depending on your interest. So Maria, space to you.
Thank you, Martina. And I also see there is another question for Olga in the chat box. And I think there are a couple of specific questions where Olga can answer and I can speak from my perspective. Well, the problem is I don't consider myself to be a woman peace builder. We always have this imposter syndrome where we don't really realize what we are doing. Is this peace building? Is this, building social cohesion? Are we just facilitating dialogues? And I think this imposter syndrome and this overall tiredness and the syndrome of burning out is something that many women peace builders are feeling right now in Ukraine. So not only we are deeply traumatized from the war, impact of the war and trauma, but also quite often we are so busy with doing our work that we don't even realize that we are being challenged and we have these particular issues. Something that I want to bring up, though, is the problem with LGBTQI community in Ukraine. In particular, those LGBTQI who have been serving in the army or have been serving in territorial defense forces. And the problem and issue there is that if someone of them dies, there is no legal ground for their partners to receive the body. So only unless they're being married to another man or woman, depending on the opposite sex, only then they will have the bodies returned. So here we have the whole absence of the legal framework in how support the big communities who's actually trying to restore the independence of Ukraine, to restore and fight for the freedom, that are not being supported on the level of the government. Something to take into account, in particular those who are also involved in the peace building field, who don't feel like they're being supported the full way. So So on one hand, I would say there's a challenge of burning out, and the second, not enough of support coming from the higher establishments and government from Ukraine.
Thanks a lot, dear. So we pass to Nina. Nina, I know you are in this conference. I hope you can still reply to the questions. I hope you managed to hear the questions. Nina?
Yes, I'm still here.
Great.
And from my side, I also can add some, maybe some ideas will be similar, but we need space for this kind of discussion. We need security in the meaning of this open discussion, because now with a sad, I can mention that the space for this discussion is shrinking, and we need to have guarantees from, I don't know, organization or even any structure in the side of Ukraine, that all kind of dialogues is available and it's possible. Because if we are talking about bridges to the future, we are talking about peace. And now talks about peace linking with a pro-Kremlin or pro-Russian propaganda. And this is a problem, because of course ordinary people want to have a peace. And I totally disagree with the First Lady of Ukraine, because in the last interview she described that Ukrainians are ready suffering 2 or 3 years without heating. No, it's not true. Nobody ready to suffering so long time. And of course we need to have any decision to stop this violence. And of course, I'm like a teacher of history. Also remember that all wars start with a peace and diplomatic way. So maybe it's time to start to start talking about this and thinking about this. And also the situation, for example, in some countries, to compare for the like Poland, because this time I'm between Ukraine and Poland, Poland and Czech Republic. And in Czech Republic, it's difficult to fundraise for a life. It's like for refugees, for medical aid, for humanitarian aid, but very easy to fundraise for weapon. And of course, people need not just weapon. We need sources to survive. Food, electricity, and medical aid. So for these basic needs, it's in some countries it's difficult to fundraise anymore. And also I want to highlight again this problem that feminist organizations switch to the humanitarian aid, and whereas the humanitarian organizations are. And I know that from the very beginning, everybody escaped from Ukraine, even OEC, Red Cross, all these humanitarian organizations. First couple of months, they was absent in Ukraine. And our partners and our activists faced with a terrible duties like evacuation of elderly and disabled people from Izum. And I think people with specific skills are more relevant for this position than ordinary women with the cards. So it's I think we need to find this kind of solution, because all duties now on the switch to the women, and spaces, and it maybe brought these kind of spaces for any dialogue, even among Ukrainian activists, because after the war and now we are all very traumatized and we react sometimes with the pain reaction. It's a and like reactive pain reaction. So it's mean that we need to heal ourselves and then start to talk to each other, because we have to talk to each other in the end, because there are any other options. So, and peace building is possible, but we need to know what kind of peace we need, and because about this we have to speak, because if we are not starting as soon as possible to talk about what kind of peace we want, we will receive some peace that we never need and never expect, like Bosnia, because I know this experience from the first hands, and they are not happy with these peace agreements. And I really want to have peace that we are demand and that we want to have. But before, we need to discuss this, and we need space to discuss. Thank you.
Wow, indeed. So thanks for reminding us that every war finishes with negotiations, and to get there, dialogue has to start immediately. You know, as you were saying, you know, we need to start the dialogue on the peace we want to achieve in order to make those negotiations more meaningful, in order to build the public pressure on political leaders from all sides, you know, to get to the ceasefire. So dialogue needs to start first. You know, we shouldn't wait for the ceasefire or for the withdrawal, you know, to start talking. And women are always very brave in this. And so thanks for what you told us. Olga, we have a question for you in the chat from Vasil. He was saying, you said about building cooperation with Belarusians, help Belarusians. Could you please elaborate on this? So Olga, you can reply to this and to the other questions as well, if you wish. Thank you.
Thank you. I found like two questions to me. For one was, just correct me if I'm wrong, about democracy building issues, and second one from Basil about helping Belarusians. Well, it's very important. Let me start from Belarusian issue. Actually highlighting the problems of women, of how to say it correctly, vulnerable citizen-based groups who now supports Ukraine, supporting their voices of women in exile, actually people in exile, men and women, whose country remains under occupation more than 2 years. And in this case, I mean Belarusian civic activists connected to Ukraine who were persecuted by Belarusian authorities since 2020, since August 2020, and have no chance to come back home. And the problem was and is exacerbated by the fact that during the war, Russian war in Ukraine, global community did not separate them sometimes from government. And our organization accepted Belarusian experts in 2 years ago, and now they are recognized as civic activists in exile. And they help Ukrainian colleagues with their initiatives, and at the same time are forced to work on issues of separation of public perception of proactive Belarusian civil society from authorities. And currently in public perception, it's very common for Ukraine, there is a view of Belarusians as supporters of Putin crimes in Ukraine. And actually it couldn't be so of course it is not true. If we are separated in this segment of very active and proactive Belarusian society who did a lot of things to stop occupation, first of all, and protests 2 years ago, these people really need help now, and women are in really bad situation. And so what about democracy? Why is it interesting for us considering democracy as a thing to do together for in Eastern Europe, for example, for countries who came from Soviet Union, for example, Ukraine and Belarus. And it's thing to do together. It's very important to cooperate here, considering the democracy in classical interpretation as a form of government which is given to people and exercised by them directly or indirectly. It is very important to highlight in our cases that efficacy of public management will and is fully dependent on how people can perform their citizenship practices, how smart probably and professional they are for that, and how can they cooperate with each other, how could they care about each other and about something common, about the state, for example, about communities, and actually about the future, about sustainable development goals, and a lot of things they are living in. So from this position, we still believe that communication with proactive core of Belarusian civil society, and I hope that someday the core of Russian civil society will understand how important this cooperation is. Actually, it would be easier to move towards peace building initiatives. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Olga. So I think we can probably close for now this webinar, but let's see this as a step of a number of talks we can have in public or in smaller groups. And I think we should, in any case, go back to our institutions, to our organizations, to work together with Ukrainian civil society on the Ukrainian National Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security. I remind you that the first plan, the first Ukrainian plan, ended in 2020. Analysis on the new plan from 2020 to 2025 is forthcoming. And of course, Ukraine is revising it within the context of the Russian invasion and the war that affected the lives of Ukrainians and led to widespread displacement and violence. So I think European countries in particular, but all countries can do a lot to make sure we contribute to this plan, and we contribute to make it very participated by civil society. I echo what Nina was saying, you know, we don't need the point of view of the First Lady as a representative of all Ukrainian women in nice newspapers, and we need to hear the voice of those women who are leading the humanitarian response, who are courageously trying to push for dialogue and support peace-building interventions. So I think the three of you gave us the strength, you know, to keep on working on this and the motivation. So thanks for taking the time to explain to us what you are doing and why you are doing it. And we really commit to keep in touch and work with you within the Peace Support Program for Ukraine and other programs that women organizations, human rights groups, NGOs are bringing forward. We thank today also the support of the Italian Buddhist Institute of Soka Gakkai that is creating the space for us to organize these activities. And we invite you to join the next series of webinars coming up on Ukraine. So thank you all. Greetings from Un Ponte Per and Patrir. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.